Warden is a fan favorite amongst many Warcraft 3 players. A hero everybody wishes they could play better, as she can spell mortal danger for opponents when used well. But she folds like a deck of cards at the slightest breeze when erring even the slightest. I'm here to help you understand the high skill floor and high skill ceiling that Warden has a little bit better. And what better way to do so than by immersing ourselves first into the rich lore of the Wardens of Kalimdor. The mysterious Wardens serve as the Night Elves' special guards and policing forces in Kalimdor. Maiev and her Wardens were in charge of keeping Illidan safely imprisoned after he made a bargain with demons to unlock unholy powers. They misguidedly locked away Azeroth's greatest defense in Illidan against the Burning Legion invasions. Tyrande eventually broke internal covenants because of her faith in Illidan's power and in his goodness, despite everything. And she busted him out of Maiev's grasp. Maiev, enraged, seeing her Wardens murdered by Tyrande's strike force and Illidan escaping, vowed to chase him to the ends of the earth. Kind of like that dude Brad Bellick did with Michael from Prison Break. So let's talk a little bit about how Warden works in a game of Warcraft 3. The Warden is a cunning hero. She's adept at entering and escaping combat. She has 2 damage spells and 1 mobility spell. Her 4th and ultimate ability allows her to summon an avatar of vengeance, the incarnate representation of her own seething quest for vengeance. This summoned creature spawns more summons, but those summons don't spawn more summons, so there is an end to it. Let's go a little deeper into the specific details about her 3 abilities and her ultimate ability. First and foremost, Maiev wants you to know she's a fan of knives, so if you're ever wondering what to do on Valentine's, not flowers, just knives. Fan of knives allows her to do area of effect damage to up to 6 targets. This spell creates a shower of daggers around the Warden that deals damage to 6 enemies, and it has no secondary effects at all. So if you pick Fan of Knives, you'll practically always want to prioritize its level ups over any other ability, since pure damage abilities must keep scaling onwards as fast as possible to remain relevant. The knives go to the 6 nearest targets. Fan of Knives level 1 does 70 damage per target with a maximum cap of 420. Unlike the Archmage's Blizzard, there is no exceeding this maximum cap of 6 units. For the Archmage Blizzard, if you hit more than 6 or more than 5, which is its limit, it starts doing reduced damage to everybody with the same damage cap. Fan of Knives doesn't work that way. It will hit up to 6 and that's it. Fan of Knives level 1 damage and range is pretty low. As you upgrade the ability, the damage goes up significantly and the range goes up a bit. Her second ability is Blink, allowing Warden to teleport a medium distance to move in or out of combat. Such an ability has a very high potential for cool plays. A couple of things about Blink. You can only blink into an area that has been previously explored. So the lighter Fog of War can be blunk into, but the dark Fog of War, where you've never been there yet during that game, cannot be blunk towards. Blink can be used to chase towards someone, finish them off, get more hits in. You can blink away to save yourself. You can blink over walls and into normally inaccessible terrain, provided you've had vision there at some point in the game. You can also blink to disjoint and dodge mid-air spells like Death Coil and Stormbolt and more. As you level up Blink, you'll first be dropping its mana cost from 50 to 10, and when you level it up again, you take its cooldown from 10 seconds to just 3 seconds. It used to be 1, which was pretty insane, but it got nerfed a couple of years ago, very recently, about 10 years ago or so. Because the base functionality of Blink doesn't change, only its mana and its cooldown, 1 point in Blink is a very strong value point. Value point is a description of a point in an ability where you say that most of the functionality of the ability is unlocked in just 1 skill point. The third basic ability is Shadow Strike. Shadow Strike is a single target damage spell that has a secondary effect of a slow and also has damage over time. It does large front-loaded damage and then pulses for poison damage up to 5 times over the next 15 seconds. Because of the slow it does, Shadow Strike makes for an okay value point. You could do 1 Blink, 1 Shadow Strike and 3 Fan of Knives. That way you've got Chase, Slow and large damage from Fan of Knives. 1 point does have a value point value. Nonetheless, its main purpose is usually to kill single targets, either units or heroes, so usually you'll still be prioritizing full Shadow Strike level ups and having Blink as your second ability. The fourth and final ability is Avatar of Vengeance. This is an ultimate ability that costs 150 mana, and the cooldown is as long as its duration, so if you never lose it, then you can resummon it right at the end of its life. Avatar of Vengeance is magic immune but not physically immune. It cannot be dispelled, it has pretty high health and it has ranged attack, decent ranged attack damage. If it dies, all of its summonables disappear, but when it doesn't die, no matter what the distance is, it can keep summoning up to 5 little avatars of mini avatars of vengeance that have piercing damage and are magic immune and physically immune. They have a relatively short duration, but they last long enough to completely annoy the living daylights out of someone by attacking priests, sorceresses, dryads, anything that's vulnerable to long range piercing damage. Then the ultimate avatar can come back, resummon more avatars, but it has to be summoned on top of corpses. If there are no corpses, then the ult isn't that valuable, but overall this is one of the strongest heroic abilities in the game. Let's go a little bit over why you would want to use Warden and how to use Warden. As a melee agility hero, Warden is a fast hero with a good attack speed, high damage and pretty high armor. Not the highest, but pretty much the second highest. Nonetheless, perhaps somewhat counterintuitively, despite being a melee agility hero, Warden is primarily a spellcaster. She's got pretty good intelligence scaling and she's incredibly reliant on both the intelligence for mana and mana regeneration. She'll generally favor mana items over any bruiser-like items one may find. It's not that she doesn't make good use of Claws of Attack and Gloves of Haste and so on, like the other melee agility heroes, Blade Master and Demon Hunter. It's just that she generally doesn't get to do that as much, and she prefers to make use of her very powerful spells. Warden is used as a hit and run, a strike and run type of hero. She either deletes single units or weakens large groups of units, or uses her Fan of Knives to absolutely destroy worker lines like peasants, peons, wisps, acolytes, and so forth. It depends on your playstyle and your ability spec, but you can even retrain to become something else in the midst of a game. Amongst all heroes in the game, Warden is possibly the most incentivized to want to be played as a solo hero, so that all the experience that you're getting funnels towards her. This is because, outside of the mobility of Blink and the small crowd control effect of Shadow Strike Slow, Warden is almost entirely a damage-based, a purely damage-based spellcaster. Much like Queen of Pain in Dota 2, but Queen of Pain has a bit more utility in Dota 2. Warden is the original, almost only damage type of hero, so she really wants to get as much XP as possible. Sharing the stage with another hero means she doesn't get as much levels, which means she might be equal level to enemy heroes, and then she doesn't have as much kill power. Warden early game usually revolves around rapid power creeping plan with greater investments into multiple Ancients of War, 2 instead of 1, possibly 1 or 2 additional Moonwells, and even additional Wisps. Many races like to apply early pressure to Warden Night Elf players in an attempt to slow down the game plan of the Warden, as she can really get out of control. If she gets high level early, that begets her kills, and those kills beget her more experience, and then before you know it, she's level 5, has a level 3 damage spell, and then before you know it, she can use that to get level 6, and that might end the game. Because of this, having a few more Wisps or Moonwells can help you detonate things, cover for Wisp losses, and heal up the Warden, in order to at least survive the early to mid game. She doesn't nullify early game pushes as much as a Demon Hunter or a Keeper of the Grove might, as a Warden level 1 or 2 is really quite weak. Spending a lot of mana on Shadow Strike or Fan of Knives doesn't feel worth it when its damage is so low at those levels. So you'll often see Warden players not spend any ability points until they're absolutely sure that they need it. You could see a level 2 Warden creeping without having picked any ability points, and then as she gets level 3, the Night Elf takes a look at the game state and will then decide if it's better to go for a Fan of Knives base play or Shadow Strike. If she is forced to fight earlier at level 1 or 2, she may feel forced to pick Shadow Strike at least, in order to start killing some units and help save herself that way. And if she ever gets surrounded, that's when you pick Blink and then you blink out. I think you can already tell that Warden is quite a high skill hero, because most people would probably feel there's a lot of mental pressure on them to pick an ability right as a fight is breaking out. Lower level players would be worried that they're not going to remember to pick the ability and then they're going to flounder in the midst of battle. So she is a high skill hero generally, high skill floor and high skill ceiling. Warden requires more resources than most heroes. She's somewhat comparable to a Demon Hunter with mana burn and immolation, meaning she goes out of mana often, just like an immolation demon, and because of that will have to use more Moonwells to heal up her health and her mana. She has a little bit less armor than the Demon Hunter, and similar health initially, but then a little bit less as it progresses. And this can be an exploitable weakness for opponents, trying to deplete the Night Elf Moonwell juice in order to make her less effective. Warden's low survivability in general means you often want to pair her up with Druids of the Claw so that they can offer her rejuvenations to keep her alive. Let's go over her stat sheet, her primary attributes, turn rate and so forth. Her primary attribute is agility, which means she gains bonus attack damage from every point of agility. She starts with 18 strength, scaling 2.4 per level, 20 agility, scaling 1.6 per level, and 16 intelligence, scaling 2 per level. She has standard scaling with 6 attribute points per level, just like most heroes. Her base cooldown time, which is called BAT in Dota 2, basic attack time, that is a term for the ability to make use of bonus attack speed in the game. There's a ranking list from 1 to 24 amongst the 24 heroes. Her BCD is 2.05, which makes her rank 11 out of 24 at being able to utilize attack speed from such sources as agility or gloves of haste, which strangely enough makes her worse at increasing her attack speed than Paladin, Tinker and even Crypt Lord. Her turn rate is 0.4, which is the same as Tauren Chieftain. This means that she has a slightly slow acceleration when it comes to turning around. Her attack range is melee, namely 100. Her sight range is 1800 and 800, just like every other hero. But she can benefit from the Hunter's Hall Ultra Vision upgrade, which increases her nighttime vision to the same as anyone's daytime vision. It will always be at 1800, a significant advantage once you unlock the possibility of that upgrade upon reaching tier 2. Her movement speed is 320, which places her on par with the Blade Master and the Demon Hunter, which is relatively fast. Her armor at level 1 is 4, exactly, 4.0 in decimals. Her starting damage is 22 to 42, which is pretty damn good. And her starting health is 550, the same as Demon Hunter, with a regen of 1.15 health per second and 1.65 health per second at night. Yes, Night Elves heal more during the night, so fighting then is good for more reasons than just the vision. Her starting mana is 240, and she gains 0.81 mana per second. Alright, let's talk about some common skill builds. I've identified 3 major skill builds for my F, for the Warden. The first one is the single target damage build, where you go Shadow Strike Blink, Shadow Strike Blink, Shadow Strike, and then take your Vengeance. And then finally Blink level 3. You're prioritizing the damage because it is very important to be able to have kill power and kill threat on both units and heroes as much as possible. Use your blink more judiciously so that you won't need the 3-second cooldown that you get unlocked at level 7. Then we have her area of effect spec, which is partially intended for wrecking worker lines. It will do a pretty good job on killing ghouls and footmen at level 2, and then at level 3 it will do great against fiends and headhunters and so forth, but it's at least always partially intended to also kill workers. In fact, getting level 5 Warden is usually a sign of a Night Elf player starting to send their Warden to the worker line to get some extra experience there, which can help her get level 6. This is a relatively reliable way to farm XP, since heroes at level 5 can no longer get experience from creeps. This spec looks like Fan of Knives, Blink, Fan of Knives, Blink, Fan of Knives, then Vengeance, and then Blink level 3. You can also go for a very greedy, mana-intensive build, which is the full damage spec. I would do it like this: Fan, Shadow Strike, Fan, then Shadow Strike and Fan. So the higher level Fan, and level 2 Shadow Strike, and then Vengeance and Shadow Strike 3. I would only go for this build if the first 2 or 3 creep camps offer me mana items, such as Sobi Mask, Pendant of Energy, Mantle of Intelligence, and so on. It's very expensive, and it means you don't have Blink, which means you lack chase power, and you're more at risk from being focused. But if it works, and you buy enough mana pots, and you are using your spells on cooldown, you're an absolute wrecking machine. I should say that Warden is the most common, the number 1 most common Book of Retraining user. So don't subscribe to these templates too heavily. The most common retraining is to begin a game with Shadow Strike and Blink, to start killing off some units definitively, but then as you get to level 4 or 5, you switch to Fan of Knives and Blink to maraud on enemy worker lines. Later, you may even rescale back to Shadow Strike Blink to focus on the hero versus hero battle that often happens as it devolves into the extreme late game. I have seen people reskill 2 or 3 times with the Warden in high level games just this year. So how to get the most out of your Warden? What are the primary objectives? Where does she stand on the emphasis between early aggression and creeping? Well, Warden is all the way on the extreme side of creeping. You would never want to harass someone with a level 1 Warden, and even a level 2 Warden harass is extremely uncommon, no matter how big of a risk an opponent is taking. Warden stands and falls with her hero levels, perhaps more than any other hero in the game, and she sacrifices everything for finding Illidan and outleveling her opponents. Just like she's consumed with her monomaniacal quest for vengeance, so too does she consume all other priorities that you might have in the game, such as expanding or being aggressive, and just concentrates on her own. She's the carry player that everybody wishes they had in Dota 2, consumed with farming, and then when she reaches her power level, she's gonna unleash her wrath on the opponent. Warden is an incredibly reliant hero who needs items, levels, and moonwells, more than almost anyone. Warden starts at 4 armor and 550 health, which makes her similar in survivability to the Blade Master and Demon Hunter initially, but she uses much more mana than those unless Demon picks Immolation. As you probably already know, mana healing from Moonwells costs 4 times as much mana points in the Moonwell than health does. Thus, any point of mana she spends over the course of a game will cost her 4 potential points of HP healing. Because of this, it is very good to think of her as not being a very tanky hero despite her base stats, because she cannot heal up as much as the others if she empties her mana pool, in addition to her health pool. She may choose to use Wisps more often to dispel enemy summons to power level, even at the cost of a healthier lumber economy. Overmaking Ancients of War, overmaking Wisps, making earlier Moonwells are all part of surviving the early game. Warden at level 1 and 2 is very weak, but at level 3 onwards she starts becoming a threat. It's usually at level 3 and onwards she can start focusing on trying to get kills, but she must be very judicious about the proper usage of mana. Her quest for vengeance stands upon the edge of a knife. Stray but a little, and it will fail, to the ruin of all. How to use the Warden in battle. Enter combat with full mana preferably, and extra mana items, such as Pendant of Energy, Wand of Mana Steel, Mana Potion, and Clarity Potion. Start combat by holding your trigger finger over safe options, like Anti-Magic Potion and also the Invulnerability Potion, so you don't instantly get crowd controlled and die. Walk up and cast your damage spells as quickly as possible on the relevant target or targets so that you can get the cooldown running to cast the spell again as often as possible. Micro your army naturally while doing all this, but focus on your Warden most of all, as she is often your main damage dealer and finisher. When she's out of mana, you can continue fighting if the fight is looking favorable, as she still has good armor and attack swing damage, but if the fight is somewhat even, this would be the time to town portal out, reset and regenerate. Warden has a large slew of desirable permanent items, and while not every item can be controlled in how you get it, as they revolve around random item drops, here's the items she's happy to see. Boots of Speed can be purchased from the Goblin Shop, and it's not an absolute necessity, that 60 bonus movement speed, as money and inventory space are often limited, all the more so because she's generally a solo hero, so there really aren't many inventory slots to go around, but Boots of Speed is a huge boon to a hero like her. It helps her stick to a target with Shadow Strike and get more auto attacks in. It is less important when playing Area of Effect spec with Fan of Knives and Blink, but it's still good there. However, you'll usually prefer to have Staff of Teleportation with the Fan of Knives build, as you have a focus to killing workers, and that's sometimes your ticket out. The next item we love on Warden is Staff of Teleportation, because of the aforementioned reason. Then there's Ruined Bracers that can really help her when going up against Death Knight and Lich. She has high armor, but she has low health, and that makes her vulnerable to spells. I say low health, but it's more like it's sooner through the health route that she's being abused, aka via spells, than via direct physical damage, and Ruined Bracers can help a lot with that. She likes Belt of Giant Strength +6 to give her more health, things like Periapt of Vitality, which is similar but doesn't offer the regen that Belt gives. Then there's Rings of Protection, if people are trying to kill her physically, like Orc players will generally be forced to do with their Blade Master. Circlet of Nobility is probably better on Warden than on any other hero in the game, even Blade Master, because she makes use of all 3 attribute points in such a grateful, greedy way. She wants armor, attack speed, health and regen, and mana more than any other hero wants those 3 together. TC doesn't care as much about agility, and Blade doesn't care as much about intelligence, but Warden needs all 3, so Circlet is super A-okay. Then she likes any mana and intelligence items, such as Mantle of Intelligence +3, Rope of the Magi +6 int, Pendant of Energy with 150 mana, and Sobi Moss with the 50% mana regen. Popular consumables for Warden include things like Potion of Lesser Invulnerability, Potion of Anti-Magic Shell, Mana Potion, and Scroll of Town Portal. Basically everything that helps to save her and cast more spells. Desirable buffs from other units or heroes are generally just a single one, Rejuvenation from Druids of the Claw. She can make pretty good use of Roar, but it's not as essential comparatively. Warden is also a pretty good Orb of Venom user, but because she has to weave in and out of combat to avoid dying, I would say Demon and Keeper are generally better Orb of Venom users. Though I'll still buy it on her because it's that good. If you do make a second hero behind Warden, even though I said she likes to be solo, that's generally going to be Naga or Pandaren Brewmaster. Sometimes it will be Demon Hunter second to help sap some spells that may threaten her, so I would say those 3 are the most common follow-up heroes. Here's how to counter Warden if you play against her. In combat, burst her down while disabling her with spells like Mountain King's Stormbolt, TC's War Stamp, and Shadowhunter's Hex, or Dark Ranger's Silence. Alternatively, remove her mana via Spellbreaker's Feedback, Demon Hunter Mana Burn, Bloodmage Siphon Mana. You can also nuke her down with direct damage spells like Coil, Nova, Stormbolt, and even something like Chain Lightning. In terms of countering her in the big picture in the macro game, human players should get about 1 or 2 Arcane Towers per base, as well as a Priest for dispelling Anti-Magic Shell. Anti-Magic Shell protects against Arcane Tower damage burn and mana burn, and because of this, you can have a Priest there to dispel it when they're gonna go and wreck your worker line. You should also have a Zeppelin per worker line so that you can quickly evacuate all peasants when she blinks in and does a Fan of Knives. They should all be at about 30 life after a level 3 Fan of Knives, so if you put the 5 peasants and a Priest in the Zeppelin, you've got time to respond to the threat, shoo her away, and then heal up everything afterwards. Obviously, this requires fast reflexes, but it doesn't require as much reflexes as saving your probe line from a Widowmine medevac drop in StarCraft 2. Screw Widowmines, man. Screw them, really, hard. Additionally, you can also configure your second hero pick around countering Warden. Going Blood Mage after opening with Archmage is a very common move to sap her mana. You can also go Archmage Alchemist to continually healing spray and out-heal her damage. When a human doesn't do a fast expansion at tier 1, they can try to launch an early Rifle, Caster and Tower timing attack with Alchemist or Blood Mage second to try and end the game before too many Master Bears come out. Orc players will generally get Shadowhunter second, and they will try to level up Healing Wave to offset her damage. Orcs should prioritize attack upgrades for Grunts, Raiders and Headhunters over armor upgrades, as this helps burst her during a Hex, and because Fan of Knives and Shadow Strike ignore armor anyway. You can also get Healing Potion against Shadow Strike spec, and Heal Scrolls against Fan of Knives spec. Undead players can try to destabilize her early game via harassing Wisps, preventing early expansions, and hitting about a 10-minute timing attack with Fiends, Destroyers, Tri-Hero, and Statues. Warden is pretty uncommon in Night Elf Mirror and should generally be avoided, but if you are up against the Warden and you open Demon, you should have no problems with her, since you'll just mana burn her forever. Lastly, let's go through some special interactions and some tricks with the Warden. Fan of Knives has a backswing, a pretty significant backswing at that. Backswing is the name of the animation that happens after you perform an attack or cast a spell in a strategy game or in a MOBA game. This animation looks good and really sells the image of the believability of the game and the universe in general, but it would feel bad to players if a unit was stun locked in finishing the entire backswing. For instance, if I was a unit in a game and my special power would be to throw a ball through someone's head, It would look like this when I throw. This is the pre-swing, and then this is the backswing. Ball leaves my hand, and then I have to move my arm back down to my side again. This is a normal animation to make for animators, but it is not an essential part because the ball is already in the air. So it is not an essential mechanical part. Because of this, game developers have allowed you to cancel part of the backswing animation and start doing something else, but only if you ask it to. If I do a throw ball and then I shift Q command to do something else, my character will finish the entire backswing animation as my arm moves back to my side. But if I interrupt it with a new command very quickly after the ball leaves my hands, I can cancel most of the backswing and do something else. This is true for many things in Warcraft 3, and all the MOBAs have copied this mechanism as well, as most of them were inspired by Warcraft 3's engine. Fan of Knives has a large backswing, so immediately give a new command after doing a Fan of Knives and you'll barely even see it. Instead of the Warden doing this, it'll be like this, and then like 6 knives are flying. So you can use your time more effectively if you cancel it. Fan of Knives also has a line of sight. It won't hit anything it can't see, even if the targets are otherwise nearby enough. This means that when someone is around the corner, or on the high ground, or they're wind-walked, or they're cloaked, or they're made invisible by a potion or a sorceress, these are all valid saves against Fan of Knives hitting. The third interaction is that Shadow Strike and Fan of Knives use a special damage type in the deep innards of Warcraft 3. This is called the Enhanced Damage type, which is a little bit like normal physical damage, but not quite. It is like normal attack damage, but it bypasses the armor of a unit. It is still classified as a spell, so it'll be blocked by things that block spells, including anti-magic shell, anti-magic potion, but it does deal physical damage, which means that if you do a Shadow Strike on a Spirit Walker in ethereal form, the entire front-loaded damage part misses. Enhanced physical damage can still not hit ethereal targets. The same is true for a banished target via the Blood Mage. So if you're fast enough, you can use a Blood Mage Banish or a Spirit Walker transformation to the ethereal realm to block both Shadow Strike's front-loaded burst damage as well as Fan of Knives. The second component to Shadow Strike's damage, the poison damage, the damage over time that ticks 5 times over 15 seconds, that one is regular magic damage, and that one will damage units that are banished or ethereal. And it will in fact make use of the 66% amplified damage that any such ethereal targets take from any magic or spell damage source. Shadow Strike's poison damage can be lethal, but Venom Orb's poison damage can't be. Combine the two together to get a lot of damage over time, and then perhaps, because of the bonus damage and leeway that Orb of Venom deals in damage on someone, Shadow Strike might just get the lethal hit on a unit that's running away and is already far removed from you. Here's an interesting one about Shadow Strike. Shadow Strike's poison damage can be negated during the invulnerability moment of channeling a Scroll of Town Portal, and during the invulnerability moment of a Potion of Invulnerability. However, the poison effect doesn't get dispelled, it just doesn't deal damage during this moment. That means that post-Town Portal or post-Invulnerability Potion, Shadow Strike's final damage ticks still happen and may still prove to be lethal. This is a very interesting one. Blink. You can overblink. Many Dota 1 or Dota 2 players may know this, but many of you may not. I didn't used to know this. Blink has an invisible maximum casting range that you need to click within of. If you click outside of its range, you'll blink in that direction, but you'll blink less far than the maximum allowed blink range. This is being displayed by the animations that you see on the screen right now, and so you need to get a feeling for the exact range that blink is allowed to go, as there is no visible indicator. If you blink too far, you will not blink far enough. If you blink just far enough to be max, then you'll be able to make use of it. This is another part where the skill floor of the hero is higher. I wouldn't call this an amazing game mechanic, but it has been part of the game for so long. In my mind, it should be at least an indicator when you control Warden, but that's newfangled stuff that comes in new games. This is in older, more seasoned games, and I'm here to teach you some of the special interactions that you may otherwise never know about. You should also know that Blink has a wind-up. If an opponent reacts or predicts fast enough, they can prevent a blink, Hex is a very fast cast point, so if you suspect someone is about to blink, you may see part of the animation of the failed blink if you do a quick Hex. Warden players are vulnerable to higher latencies. It's usually tough for people from Brazil, Australia or the Americas to play Warden. And you'll see more other type of heroes that are more based on macro strategy than Wardens, which needs such good ping. Blink, when done well, can disjoint projectiles. If the distance and reaction time is sufficient, you can dodge things like Death Coil and Stormbolt. At maximum range, once you see the Mountain King winding up for a Stormbolt, it is relatively trivial, with decent ping, to dodge the Stormbolt. But as you get nearer, you have to start relying on prediction rather than reaction, as there wouldn't be enough time for the cast point of your blink to prevent the Stormbolt from hitting you. At 600-700 range it's relatively easy, but at 300 range you would need to rely on prediction. I think I'm gonna get Stormbolted soon, I'll just go ahead and blink, and then the Stormbolt flies, and both the damage and the stun part miss you entirely. I asked my community for a couple of more tricks when it comes to how to play Warden. Are there any interactions I should know about? And they told me building 30 moonwells and killing 100 workers. Those are the final interactions that I'll be imparting you with. Hope you enjoyed this Warden spotlight. This one was relatively difficult to make because she is a higher skill hero and I'm not a Night Elf main player, and there may be a couple of tricks that I possibly missed. If you know of any, be sure to drop them in the comments and I would love to highlight them with a pinned comment. Warden was requested a lot in my question of what you wanted to see next. What other hero would you love to see more details of that I can deep dive, do my research and tell you everything I know about her so that you can learn how to play that hero a little bit better, or at the very least be enjoyed by me talking about a game that we all love very much. Let me know in the comments. Thank you so much for watching and supporting this channel with a subscribe if you enjoyed the content. Be sure to give a like, share the video with everyone. It helps a lot. And I'll see you guys with the next content here on Grubby Talks. Thank you so much for watching. Bye bye.